Well, we now know that Gonzaga will not see Bronny James on Saturday, but we still got plenty of exciting matchups to discuss ahead of the big game in Sin City between Gonzaga and USC. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Happy Friday, Zag Nation. I am thrilled to be joined today by Matt Zemek. Matt is the managing editor of the USA Today's Trojan Wire site. Fantastic college sports writer, my former boss, as I spent about a year writing at Trojans Wire at USA Today. Matt, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. Looking forward to getting a chance to talk about this USC team. And before we get into the actual on-court matchup between Gonzaga and USC, I want to talk about Bronny James, because we found out shortly before we hit the record button here that Bronny is not going to be available for this game against Gonzaga, but he is practicing next week. He is expected to be cleared by the USC doctors very soon and should be on the court. If not the next game, which is against Long Beach State, I think on the 10th, probably pretty soon. What does that mean for USC to get Bronny back in the mix?
It's huge. And before the season, I think if you talk to people in and around USC, they would have said, with Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Collier, and Kobe Johnson in the backcourt, like that's a lot of mouths to feed right there. You add Bronny to that mix, could kind of cause some complications. But the way the season has gone, the way the season has begun for USC, they need him. They need his shooting. They need his perimeter defense. USC has not been up to par in either of those categories. So Bronny's going to give USC, once he comes back, he's going to give USC some ingredients the Trojans really need, because their bench has not really delivered. Isaiah Sellers, Harrison Hornery, just not providing what one would reasonably identify as high-end minutes. And that's a real point of concern for USC. After the starting five, you get into that bench, backup wings, backup shooters, they're not providing high volume, high impact performances for the most part. So Bronny fits in there. He'll probably be the sixth man, certainly at the beginning of when he comes back. Maybe that will continue throughout the Pac-12 season. He'll give Andy Enfield, another interchangeable part in the backcourt. And, Boogie and Kobe and Collier, they won't have to play maybe quite as many minutes. Enfield can stagger those four guys, Boogie, Collier, Kobe, Bronny. He can mix and match those four, have two on the floor at one time, have two resting at one time. Sometime he'll play three of them, but he'll be able to rest guys so that USC can really, go at its opponents all 40 minutes. You're resting two, you're playing two, really gives USC many more options. And in terms of the time frame, the James family statement said, quote unquote, soon after he returns to practice next week. I think, the dream scenario for USC right now would be that he returns for that Sunday, December 17 showcase at Auburn.
Yeah.
Love to have him back there, but being realistic, that might be a little too soon. It might be rushing it, and you don't want to rush things with, a rehab and all that Bronny's been through health-wise. We went through this a year ago with Vince Iwuchukwu recovering from cardiac arrest. Both cardiac arrests were in July, so it was a similar time frame. But Bronny seems to be on track to return sooner than Iwuchukwu did. Iwuchukwu returned January 12th, 2023. So Bronny's probably going to beat him there. I think the reasonable scenario, which is still a very good one for USC, it's not ideal, but the reasonable scenario He comes back for the Pac-12 season opener against Oregon. That's on December 28th. So he'd be able to play on that Oregon road trip to Eugene and Corvallis at the end of December. I think if you get him at the start of Pac-12 play, that's probably better than USC fans had reason to hope, given that Iwuchukwu didn't come in until mid-January of last year when the Trojans had already played 4 or 5 Pac-12 games. If you get Bronny for the full Pac-12 slate, probably a better than expected outcome for USC.
Well, obviously, you mentioned the three-headed monster of those guards with Kobe and Collier and, of course, Boogie and the way that they've been playing. And certainly some more depth would be great. I know Gonzaga fans are definitely jealous because our guard depth is at a significant low right now after the preseason injury to Steel Venters. We'd love to have 4 interchangeable guards the way that USC is going to be set up. But for this game, they'll only have the 3. But obviously, tremendous talent out of this group here. Boogie's averaging over 20 points per game. Collier's not too far behind him. Kobe Johnson looks every bit the part of that first-round NBA draft pick that a lot of people are talking about with him. And I guess, how has that chemistry been? You mentioned like the mouths to feed situation. It sure seems like there has been a pretty good amount of cohesion among that group. I know that there are some turnover issues, particular with Collier. He's turning the ball over like you might expect a freshman who has a high usage rate to do so. But for Gonzaga fans who haven't seen a lot of USC, what can they expect, particularly from this trio of backcourt players? And maybe what are some ways that Gonzaga's group can hope to slow them down?
Yeah, so, I'm a little bit disappointed with what we've seen from USC. I mean, let's keep in mind, this team's already lost twice. Mm-hmm. Now, when it lost to Irvine, it didn't have either Boogie Ellis or Kobe Johnson. So you're missing 2 players. And, you and I follow Western college basketball. Mm-hmm. We know Russell Turner's a really good coach at Irvine. Yeah. Like, he'll make you pay when you're missing 2 high-end players. So, like, that's the casual fan might say, oh, that's an atrocious loss. It's not an atrocious loss, but it did expose the lack of depth on the USC roster, that you didn't have guys who could step in and compensate for those losses. So again, the depth is still a concern until Bronny comes back and reduces that problem. And then the other thing is, because Boogie and Kobe and also DJ Rodman, the transfer from Washington State, they all missed at least 1 game in mid-November. And the injuries have prevented this team from having practice time together. And as well as I do, in November, you really need to build cohesion. You need to get guys playing together, being used to each other, and these injuries have interrupted that. And so what we saw in San Diego, that 2-game tournament against Seton Hall and then Oklahoma, the guys USC looked like a team that had not been practicing together nearly as much as Andy Enfield would have hoped. So those injuries have thrown a monkey wrench into all of this. And with Collier, the problem is not that he's making mistakes, all right? The problem is that he's making mistakes and he's not offsetting them with enough big plays. And, his best game to date this season was the opener. It was the first game against Kansas State. Like, that was the vintage Isaiah Collier. That was exactly what USC was hoping for. If you recall, Andy, in that game, 3 and 1 baskets in the first 17 minutes of that game. That's hard to do against anybody, but especially against a Jerome Tang, Big 12, Kansas State defense. I mean, that tells you how skilled he is. That tells you how physical he is in terms of finishing through contact. We have not seen that guy since the Kansas State game, and defenses are playing him for the drive. They know that his jumper is not all the way there, and he's been okay with the jump shot, but the thing is, and this from having covered USC at Trojans Wire in the past, that Andy Enfield's offense is bogged down. And the hope was this season that Isaiah Collier, he would be the antidote against a scoring drought in the middle of the second half, that by getting to the foul line, drawing fouls, getting the opposing team in foul trouble, and just leading a parade to the free throw line. That is what Isaiah Collier was supposed to be able to do whenever things got a little sticky, whenever things got stagnant at the offensive end. Oh, I'm Isaiah Collier. I'm big. I'm strong. I can get to the rim whenever I want. Haven't seen that really since the Kansas State game. And that is the player USC needs to see against Gonzaga. And of course, so you mentioned this in the open. How's Gonzaga going to deal with it? Like you just make Isaiah Collier beat you with the jump shot. You do not let him get to the rim. And the other thing to point out in terms of this problem for USC, Collier not being able to get to the rim and get to the foul line as regularly as he did in that first game against Kansas State. The other thing we're not seeing, I was expecting Collier to be getting into the paint, maybe like the elbow area, or maybe, just to the side of the lane, like kind of like 12 to 15 feet from the basket. He draws multiple defenders, and then he'll throw a lob to Josh Morgan, or maybe it's Kobe Johnson, maybe it's DJ Rodman. I thought we were going to see a little lob city at USC. That has not materialized at all. And that's something to keep in mind for an Andy Enfield team, which struggles with turnovers. It's not just a Collier thing. You know that USC's offense has had a turnover problem consistently under Enfield. So, sometimes you don't have to make a shot to create good offense. You just draw two defenders, you put a soft floater up on the glass, and another guy cleaning it up. That can be good offense. That can certainly be good offense. If you're drawing people away from the rim, a missed shot is still good offense because you have such a good chance to get the offensive rebound. Haven't seen any of that. So, that's what USC wants to establish, and that's naturally, therefore, what Gonzaga needs to be wary of. You stop the dribble penetration, you don't let Isaiah Collier get to the foul line, and you also prevent any, weak side offensive putbacks. That's something USC has not done well. And so if you're Gonzaga, you don't want USC to get started.
Well, Matt and I are going to take a look at USC's front court and that matchup against Graham, EK, Anton Watson, and the Zags. All that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time than right now to get in on the action. The app is really, really easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options. You can bet on the money line, player props, over-unders, the spreads, and more. And right now, the Zags currently have 800-1 odds to make the Final Four. If you're feeling like this team is going to be dancing well into the NCAA tournament, you want to drop $25 on it when that weekend rolls around and the Zags are in the Final Four, you're $200 richer and super, super happy. So visit FanDuel.com now /locked-on and kick off the college basketball season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. I want to move on to the front court a little bit, and some of what you touched on there, I think, kind of applies here, in particular the foul situation. I think you mentioned the depth for USC not being where they want it to be, and I think they have a tremendous rim protector in Joshua Morgan. He's really good at what he does, but Gonzaga did a good job against the Dembona, obviously another rim protector in the Pac-12 at UCLA. Now that game, the referees just went absolutely nuclear and called 40-something fouls, so everybody was in foul trouble in that one. But Gonzaga has four bigs. They have four bigs who are capable of rotating in and out. They have four bigs who for the most part, are capable of stretching the floor, as particularly the backup bigs are 35, 38% three-point shooters. And to me, I think a key for Gonzaga is going to be their advantage offensively down on the block. Graham Ike has looked every bit like that Mountain West Player of the Year that he was projected to be before he suffered an injury and missed that entire season at Wyoming. And to me, it feels like if Gonzaga is able to either pull Morgan away from the rim by hitting outside shots, or force him to get into some foul trouble and try to get into USC's depth, that could be an area of strength for Gonzaga, because the guard scoring hasn't quite been there. I think Nembhard and Hickman are going to have better offensive days than they've had up to this point. But for me, it feels like the key for Gonzaga to win this one, at least offensively, is going to be on the block. What have you seen from USC's defense, and particularly in the front court, and kind of how do you think that that matchup might work out in this one?
Yeah, so Josh Morgan, he blocked 10 shots against Seton Hall last week. So I mean, he is a fly swatter. He does that really well. Mm-hmm. However, and this gets back to, it's kind of like the other side of the coin with USC not getting offensive putbacks as part of its offense. It also isn't protecting the defensive backboard. That's how it lost to Oklahoma. You had three guys just watching the ball, not sealing out their man. That's how the Sooners beat them on Friday. So USC's had a backboard problem this season. And I think in many ways, I think the glass could be the decisive factor here. precisely for what I've been outlining, that USC needs to get more points off putbacks, and it needs to limit how often the opponents get putbacks and second, third chance points. So Morgan's defense and USC's initial half-court defense, not that bad. But then denying the second chances, that's really been the Achilles heel for this team. And it also brings up another point discussing USC's bigs, Andy, and that is that as valuable as it is and will be that Bronny James is coming back, if you told me in the offseason, like in October, early November, who's more important, Bronny James or Vince Iwuchukwu? I would have said Vince Iwuchukwu. And, we'll see how this season unfolds. But I'm going to maintain that position, at least for now, because Iwuchukwu, 5-star big man, and, he came in the middle of last season, but, he got back problems in late February, early March. So he didn't play in the Pac-12 tournament. He didn't play in the NCAA tournament. And USC really missed him against Tom Izzo and Michigan State in the NCAA tournament. Exactly the kind of rugged, deep defender rebounder type that USC needed on the floor. Didn't have it. And that was a huge absence. And then Iwuchukwu had a medical procedure for that back problem shortly after the season ended. So what that did, it robbed him of an off season. He was not able to practice in the summer. He didn't join the team's August European tour to Greece and Croatia. So he's been playing catch up. He's been playing minimal minutes, backup minutes behind Josh Morgan. And, from a USC perspective, I wish this game against Gonzaga was next week. I think Iwuchukwu needed another week to kind of build up, ramp up, to be at a place where he's ready to go like 25, 30 minutes. I don't think he's going to play that much against Gonzaga. I'd expect 15 to 18 minutes. They really need his defense and rebounding against Gonzaga. I mean, I watched the Gonzaga UCLA game at the Maui Invitational. That was big boy basketball. That was fierce, not for the faint of heart. USC really needs the best of Vince Iwuchukwu, and I don't think just because of his rehab, like it's not a commentary on him as a player or as a worker, as someone who's dedicated to his craft. He has a great work ethic. He's respected in the locker room. People love him, but just the injury rehab, he's been playing catch up the whole way. And I don't think you're going to see him in a position to max out. And Andy Enfield will only be able to get so many minutes from him. So that definitely plays in the Zags' favor on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup to not have your rim protecting bigs at full strength, just because, again, Gonzaga can throw those 4 bigs, not just Graham Ike, not just Anton Watson, who went absolutely insane against UCLA at 32 points on 1 missed field goal. Don't know if we're expecting that from him again, but again, like USC is going to have to find ways to guard multiple bigs, and Braden Huff has looked fantastic in a bench role for Gonzaga so far this season. We'll be interested to see what he looks like against some better competition, but tough go for USC to not have Iwuchukwu for as probably as many minutes as he's capable of giving. It strikes me as a game where Gonzaga might be able to take advantage, but then if they run into this team in the NCAA tournament, it might be a bit of a different story with Bronny back, with Iwuchukwu playing more minutes. And I did want to talk a little bit about an Inland Northwest alumni, somebody that many Gonzaga fans have probably seen quite a bit of. That's, of course, DJ Rodman, son of Dennis Rodman, 4-year player at Washington State. What has his adjustment looked like at USC? He was a guy that I was kind of championing as a potential addition for Gonzaga in the portal, but obviously couldn't resist going down to LA. And I think there's a nice fit there, but I'm curious what his role kind of is and how you think he might make an impact on this game.
Yeah, so he missed a game. He missed 1 game in the middle of November as well with a moderate injury problem. I mean, he played in San Diego against Seton Hall in Oklahoma, but he wasn't 100% for around a week. And so as with Kobe Johnson as well, and also Iwuchukwu in terms of his rehab, we haven't seen the best of DJ Rodman. But again, I don't think that's a verdict on him as a player. But his role, I think many people in and around the USC program thought it was going to be 3-and-D, shoot 3-pointers, while, Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis, they have the ball. Collier in particular penetrating having a drive and kick game, when defenses really sag into the paint, try to stop his dribble penetration. DJ Rodman was supposed to be a catch and shoot guy. Now, Bronny James is going to fill that role when he comes into the lineup. So right now, though, it's only DJ Rodman is kind of in that 3-and-D role. But of course, the other thing, as you know, is that Rodman's undersized. He's often playing at the 4 against a bigger man, and that requires a lot of energy at the defensive end of the floor. And so realistically, you want him to be able to get into a rhythm as a 3-point shooter and become more lethal on that end. But that's going to be the long-term project as the season goes along. Right now, they need his defense at the 4, being able to stand up to oftentimes taller guys in the paint within 10 feet of the basket. So if they can get just a strong defender rebounder type effort against Gonzaga, and also again in that game against Auburn that I mentioned on December 17th, they'll take that. But then you hope that as we get into the Pac-12 season, that he'll become that complete two-way player that we saw at Washington State.
Taking a bit of a bigger scope look at USC right now, obviously you mentioned the 2 losses, the Irvine loss where they weren't at full strength, the Oklahoma loss. How important does that make this game against Gonzaga? Because right now, and I think this might change, but right now they have no other ranked games on their non-conference schedule. I think Auburn should be ranked right now. I think there's a chance that they are ranked by the time that game rolls around. But outside of that, not a ton of other ranked opportunities for USC. Of course, they'll get into conference play. They'll get a couple shots at Arizona. UCLA and Colorado are teams kind of on the periphery of being ranked in that conversation. But it kind of feels like that maybe puts a little bit more pressure on this particular game for USC, just in terms of building that resume heading, as we get closer and closer to March.
No question about it. And, Isaiah Collier, he's a freshman. And so a lot of what you're seeing from him, you can say, well, these are freshman mistakes. Yeah. But there's a part of me which thinks, he's going up against non-elite opponents. And maybe there's been a sense from Isaiah Collier that, I can just show up and physically dominate. I can just impose my will on the opposition. In Gonzaga, this is not, it's never an opponent that you just show up and say, oh, I'm just going to dominate. There's too much respect for the program, the school, the players, Mark Few. And so I am really interested in how Isaiah Collier handles this. And yes, there's a lot of pressure on USC to grab this win, significantly boost the resume. But I wonder, how much is Isaiah Collier kind of feeling the pressure of needing to be the guy, needing to be the savior for USC basketball, the guy who makes it all happen, the guy who can make this season something special? Is what he's going through just a freshman phase, or is he actually, really internalizing the pressure of expectations that attended this USC basketball season? If Collier plays a big time game, even if USC loses, if Collier plays a really, really big time game, USC can at least walk out of this saying, all right, our dude, our alpha male, he's for real. He's ready. And when we get to UCLA and Arizona in the Pac-12 season, we're going to get the best of Isaiah Collier, in which case USC is going to be fine. But if Collier plays another ragged, disjointed game and he enters Auburn and then Christmas and then the start of Pac-12 play still searching for his game, that's going to be very concerning. So obviously, it's a huge game for USC, and I think that the news of Bronny returning, that's going to fire guys up. It's going to boost the mood in the locker room. So in that sense, maybe that lightens the mood for Isaiah Collier and the rest of his teammates. So you obviously want to win, but really the main thing USC has to get out of this game is that Isaiah Collier, he's going to be the guy throughout the rest of the season, meaning that you're going to see his best or something close to it on a very consistent basis, something we haven't seen in this month of November.
Well, Matt, I was hoping to ask about your predictions for the game as well as your X factor. I'm guessing Collier sounds like he might be the X factor for you in this game, depending on how he plays and whether he shows up in this one. But do you got a prediction on, maybe not an exact score, but at least maybe some prediction on how this game might flow, how it might shake out, what that might look like when it's all said and done?
Yeah, so like Isaiah Collier is my most important player, but I think the X factor is the glass. It's the backboard. USC being able to get putbacks, and from Isaiah Collier breaking down the Zags defense if he can, and then also denying the Zags second chance points at the other end. That in terms of like a facet of competition, that's what I'd focus on. But I don't think USC is ready. I mean, part of this is Vincey Iwuchukwu not being able to play as many minutes as the Trojans need and as Andy Enfield would like. It's also about Isaiah Collier, going through some struggles. Like we hope he's going to be at his very best, but you probably wouldn't expect that the way the last few games have gone. And Mark Few should be able to keep him away from the rim. If Porter Moser in Oklahoma were able to do that, he was not getting to the foul line against Oklahoma. So if Porter Moser can do it, Mark Few can do it too. So I just think that USC's offense is still at a place where it's going to bog down. It won't get the volume of free throws that it needs to, again, ward off those scoring droughts, those Andy Enfield scoring droughts. And just USC has not been as cohesive as hoped for because of injuries over the past few weeks. So I'm going to say Gonzaga 80, USC 69.
Love it. I think I was going to go with like an 8 to 10 point victory for Gonzaga. So that's really close in line there. I think it's going to be a decently close game. It does matter those lulls. Gonzaga has had a fair amount of second half lulls this year. So we'll see if USC and Gonzaga have them at the same time, if they overlap, if one team can manage to avoid it. I think rebounding is a huge X factor in terms of players. I would probably go with Anton Watson just in terms of how USC is going to defend him and then how he plays on the defensive end of the floor. I'm curious how they'll match him up. Will he be on Rodman? Will he potentially get some chances to even guard Kobe Johnson? What that might look like for them. But I think it's going to be a really exciting and fun game. And I kind of want to close out the show, Matt, just asking you how you kind of see the rest of USC's season going. And obviously, it's very clear that that's going to be dependent on Bronny. It's going to be dependent on Iwuchukwu. It's going to be dependent on Collier kind of taking that leap. But looking at the Pac-12 right now, I mean, Arizona is the clear favorite, and they should be the clear favorite. They are a phenomenal program at this point. But there's kind of a gap at number 2. It could be USC. It could be UCLA if their young guys and their international players kind of take that leap, which they just haven't quite done yet. Colorado is a team a lot of people have liked. I'm not as enthused about them, but they're certainly in that conversation too. Do you think USC there's an outcome where they're the second best team in the Pac-12, or where do you think they might finish there?
So, in terms of like the full picture, USC's chances of getting that high NCAA tournament seed, that was a big talking point going into the season. USC's chances of getting a really high March seed have taken a big hit with everything that's gone on. And of course, like they need to beat Gonzaga and or Auburn to really make that a legitimate possibility. And right now it's hard to see USC getting those wins. But if you get Bronny James in the fold for the start of Pac-12 play on December 28th, and you get a full strength Vince Iwuchukwu, and you get this team practicing together with a fuller, deeper unit where you have Josh Morgan and Vince Iwuchukwu both, able to play significant minutes in the front court, and then you have those 4 guards, Bronny, Kobe, Collier, and Boogie, being Andy Enfield being able to mix and match them. That's really formidable. And so I think the realistic outlook for USC is, it's probably going to be a struggle bus for a few more weeks, and you're probably not going to get that high end win out of the conference, though that Kansas State win is going to travel. That's going to be a good win come March. But, it's probably going to be a struggle through Christmas. But then with accumulated practice time and getting the full strength roster, USC could legitimately be the second best team in the Pac-12 behind Arizona. I mean, UCLA is a work in progress with all those Euros and youngsters. UCLA certainly looks to me like a team that has a high ceiling and could really be something special. But, a lot of variables are in play there. But then, the biggest reason to think that USC can be second best in the Pac-12 behind Arizona is that what's Colorado doing? What's Oregon doing? Those two teams have been significant disappointments to this point in the season. So, like the idea that USC can rise above those two that shouldn't be too hard. But it's really going to be probably a USC UCLA battle for second behind Arizona.
Future Big Ten battle right there. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, help us preview this USC game. It's one of the most exciting non-conference games for Gonzaga. Really looking forward to the opportunity to watch this one. And again, I appreciate you giving us some extra insight.
Thanks so much, Andy. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap us up for today. Thanks again for Matt to come in on the show to help preview this USC matchup. I will be in Las Vegas on Saturday for this game and for the Washington-Colorado State game ahead of time. If you're in town, let me know. Hopefully get a chance to say hi to some of you. That's going to wrap us up for this week. Thanks again for making Locked On Zags your first listen or your first watch of the day. Smash that like button. Leave a comment on YouTube or a review on iTunes. All of it is much appreciated. Join us in that Discord channel as well. Link in the show notes. You can find us there talking hoops 24/7. Have a great weekend, Zags fans. And until next time, as always, go Zags.